на главном корпусе, третий, четвертый, между третьим и четвертым. А там люди есть? Да. Поднимай над состав. Поднимаю, начальника поднял. Так всех, весь офицерский состав, офицерский корпус поднимай.
Авария произошла.
The accident, or rather the catastrophe that took place, was the biggest technological disaster in human history.
The accident affected all of Ukraine, all the systems in Russia, and the USSR, and other countries too. So in my opinion, the people who contained the damage actually saved the whole world. I devoted my life to building power stations and nuclear reactors. The Chernobyl reactor was the last I built.
For many years, I tried to forget it. It was a childhood trauma, and I didn't tell anyone about it. I'm still afraid. It still haunts me.
The Chernobyl disaster still affects people. People who are suffering, dealing with illnesses, people who are dying.
Since I came back, the doctors did their best to help me. I had 2 strokes here. The blood vessels in my head were damaged by the accident.
It haunts me. When night falls, horrible memories of Chernobyl come to me, and I can't fall asleep because it keeps haunting me every day.
Не подтвердили, авария там произошла у них. Это диспетчер Припяти сказала. Пожарная охрана. Алло, Иванков. Да. Значит, вы выезжаете в Припять? Алло. Да, я слышу. На атомную станцию выезжаете. Там 3-й и 4-й блок горит крыша.
On the day of the disaster, I woke up in the morning. It was a Friday. I had school that day. So I went to school as usual. But on the way to school, I saw lots of ambulances and machines washing the streets with some chemical, some kind of foam. It looked like snow all over the street. It was foam, a chemical. This was unusual. They usually just used water. That was peculiar. And when I got there, no one was around. The school was closed, and I didn't understand why. There was no announcement that there was no school. When I got to school, the door was closed. There was no one outside. I stood there for a few minutes and knocked on the door. Then they opened the door and they let me in. I went to my classroom and saw kids there. Some were crying because their parents were on duty at the reactor that night and they didn't come home.
I only found out about the accident at the Chernobyl station 3 or 4 days later, when they had to tell the whole world about it, because the radiation had already reached Sweden. We all had no idea about it, neither the army nor the civilians.
There was a call. The roof of Reactor 4 is on fire. The station was secured by a military firefighting unit. If a nuclear station is on fire, that's the biggest emergency there is. The first to arrive were 2 firefighting units who were a 5-minute drive away, and they went right to work. They were the first ones to make it to the reactor. Every single one of them died.
Of course, all the people working there, they were so horribly burned. None of them survived. Obviously, none of them survived. I don't know when I slept for the first time. When we ate for the first time. I can't remember. I only remember the young men, the soldiers coming in with burns. And we thought, where is he going? To the helicopter or to Kiev? Where is he going? That's all we could think of. None of us knew what to do. We didn't know what radiation was. None of us had ever seen such a thing. It was like we were at war. So tragic. So horrific. So many people. So much chaos. There were people on the floor. So many people everywhere.
I knew the reactor had exploded and that radiation began to spread all around into the air. When radiation rises in the air, it's like detonating an atomic bomb. The shock wave collapsed the reactor roof and destroyed the reactor, which, as you know, made the graphite fly all the way to Reactor 3. There was graphite everywhere.
On the night between April 25th and 26th, I was operations commander of the brigade. I had a whole control room with instruments, but our instruments didn't show anything. They didn't show that the radiation was increasing, so we didn't know a thing. But when we went outside, we saw that around the puddles left by the rain, some substance had accumulated. I figured, naturally, that it was pollen from the surrounding trees. I actually think it was nuclear fallout. At the time, we thought it was pollen. And the truth is, neither Regional HQ nor the brigade commander told us there had been an accident at the reactor.
The foreman found me and told me to move out, so I went. I had no idea the situation was so bad, that the radiation level was so high. Who knew? Who said anything? Everything was top secret. We were the greatest country. We had to catch up with and beat America and so on.
The government gave us no information, nothing on the radio or TV, only rumors. Some said there was a malfunction. Some said there was an explosion, a fire. We had no idea what happened. We were given no information, so we decided to go ourselves and see what was happening. So my father took all the kids, 4 kids. My mom was busy at home. And we went to the stadium in Pripyat. It was a fairly open space, and we could see the reactor from there. And I saw, because it was daytime, I couldn't really see the flames, but I saw the smoke, black smoke coming out. And I saw lots of helicopters and planes and cars and military men on the way to the reactor. It was then that we realized a disaster had occurred.
When we got to Chernobyl, they sent me straight to City Hall. At City Hall, they told me, your mission is to check vehicles and prevent any disorder, shouting, disturbances, and so on. We secured the area. What does that mean? It means we checked vehicles going in and out. We escorted buses carrying the evacuated people and children, and we caught looters.
Мы сопровождали автобусы с людьми и с детьми при эвакуации и ловили мародеров.
I only remember being in Pripyat, nothing before that. So my whole life began there. I went to kindergarten and school there. I grew up there until the disaster happened. All the families living in town had something to do with the reactor. Some worked there, some worked in town, in the schools, but they all had some connection. It was the town's whole purpose. There were plenty of families, and most of them had many children. And because of that, we had lots of kindergartens and schools. I was in 3rd grade. In the morning, I went to elementary school, and around noon, I went to art school. I had lots of friends there. It was a wonderful life. You could even call it perfect. I didn't see what was happening around me. Maybe it was just because I was a child, but that's how I remember it. It was a special town.
A woman in labor came in. She was giving birth, so we took care of her. Before that, the same woman, who was married to a fireman, stood on her balcony and watched the reactor explode, and had been in constant contact with the radiation for 24 hours. And when the baby came out, it was black. That was the first incident. A few hours later, another girl in labor came in. She gave birth, but the baby was dead. After that, all the pregnant women, at every stage of pregnancy, were called in for emergency examinations. And when they were all examined, which was done very quickly because time was of the essence, time determined who'd live and who'd die. The women were in a terrible state. What we saw inside with all the fetuses. It was exactly like in the books. All the heart defects, the eyes, the limbs. Within just a few hours, all those babies were contaminated. There were 36 women at all stages of pregnancy, and it went on for a night or a bit longer. Maybe a bit longer. That's how we dealt with the problem. It was the most horrific day of my life. I wish I could erase it.
Later that evening, soldiers went to all the houses and told the people to prepare to leave. We never thought we'd be leaving forever. They told us it will last 4 days. They told us to take only casual clothes, like going on a picnic or camping in a tent. We thought we were leaving because they said there were things they had to do, cleanse the town, so everyone had to leave, that we'd be gone for 4 days and then come back. So we took nothing with us.
People didn't know where they were going, what was happening, or why. They didn't take any clothes or possessions. I heard them crying, screaming. Imagine leaving all your possessions behind. You drop everything, and they take you somewhere. You have no idea where. You don't know where they're taking you. You don't know what's going to happen. That was the first stage. The second stage was worse.
Внимание, внимание! Внимание, внимание! Уважаемые товарищи, городской совет народных депутатов сообщает, что в связи с аварией на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции в городе Припяти складывается неблагоприятная радиационная обстановка. С целью обеспечения полной безопасности людей и в первую очередь детей возникает необходимость провести временную эвакуацию жителей города. Для этого каждому жилому дому сегодня, 27 апреля, начиная с 14:00 часов, будут поданы автобусы в сопровождении.
That was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. I had a crisis. My life was torn in two.
This is my house. I haven't been here in 33 years. My children grew up here. We spent the best years of our lives here.
Свои лучшие молодые годы.
When I first entered the zone, they put a mask on me, on my face, about 20 kilometers from the station. And I wore that mask all day. That was on the first day. On the second day, I didn't wear a mask when I entered the zone, only when I went up on the roof. On the third day, I only wore it when I was actually on the roof. And sometimes, on the roof, I'd take it off so I could smoke. I'll explain why. The enemy is invisible. It has no flavor, smell, or form, so people weren't afraid. We didn't realize at the time what it could eventually cause. Later I saw the results, when people I had worked with started dying. But we weren't afraid.
I heard about two generals that met, who were in charge of the platoons working near the reactor. In the orange forest. You know what the orange forest is? One was walking toward the forest, the other toward the reactor, and they started talking. There was a puddle by the path. One of them stepped into the puddle. They always carried radiometers. He tested the foot, and the radiometer showed 200 Röntgen. The puddle measured 200 Röntgen, and they sent him straight home. He'd only stood there for 10 minutes. 1 foot in a puddle was all it took.
The radiation had struck many people, and by then it was felt in other countries too. In Finland, in Poland, in Italy.
Gorbachev gave a speech on May 14th, and on May 15th, there was a government meeting where it was decided to charge our bureau with the task of building a protective structure over the reactor that exploded. The people nicknamed the structure the sarcophagus.
Каждый день в тот период, когда саркофаг мы еще не переделали.
Throughout that period, before they finished the sarcophagus, the protective structure, the reactor gave off a massive amount of nuclear emissions, which covered an area where not millions, but tens of millions lived.
Что миллион, десятки миллионов. Потому что атмосферное явление, ветер разносил не только...
Natural functions like the wind carried not just the nuclear fallout from the explosion, but also the contaminated dirt and sand. It was a huge catastrophe.
Это была колоссальная катастрофа.
In order to reduce the nuclear fallout, it was decided to stop trying to extinguish it with water. You understand why? Instead, it was decided to cover the reactor with sand. For this, they put together a special brigade of military helicopter pilots who dropped sacks of sand and lead around the reactor to reduce the nuclear fallout.
На 50 метров не ниже, болтаночка. Слышу. Работу наблюдаю. Наблюдаю. Тут правее, порядка 80 метров. Хорошо, отлично, вот так и держать.
При ликвидации последствий были использованы роботы.
For the neutralization process, robots were used which were brought from Japan and Germany.
Когда их привозили, то, по всей видимости,
When they brought them, apparently they didn't tell the engineers about the radiation levels on the roof. When they activated the robots on the roof, they stopped working. One robot fell off the roof because it lost control. And that was just the robots. We were living human beings who had worked and absorbed all that radiation for short periods of time, granted, but they called us bio-robots.
Нас назвали биороботами. Биоробот.
Там, где не могут.
In places where the robots couldn't do the job the bio-robots did it, people had to do it. There was no time to find another solution. They made every effort not to endanger human lives, but nothing else could be done. There was no other solution. The robots simply didn't work, you see, and we were very frightened.
The operation of pumping out the water and removing the nuclear waste around the station had to be done quickly. It had to be raked out with a shovel, by hand.
When we came out on the roof, they'd say, "There's a graphite rod. It has to be removed." It was impossible to measure the radiation levels of the graphite rods. They were far beyond what our instruments could measure.
Although we worked in short shifts, we had to work in difficult conditions and near the reactor. Our distance from the reactor determined how much radiation we absorbed. So we used monitors, and at the end of the day, we saw that they'd absorbed an almost lethal amount of radiation. Yeah, you'd have to call that lethal.
Мы поднимали на крышу.
We sent 800 men to the roof every day. They put on lead aprons and went straight onto the roof, where they used shovels to rake the waste and dump it into the reactor below. The second their time was up, they were ordered off the roof. Then they'd come down and go change clothes while the next 20 men went up. And this process was repeated non-stop.
Мы получали личный состав из военкоматов, а
We were instructed that the men could take a maximum dose of 10 Roentgen. This amount of radiation determined how long the soldiers were allowed to stay on the roof. We continued working as we saw fit and did as much as we could without absorbing the maximum amount of radiation.
Вот это был молодой парень, да, это был пожарник, но я не помню его фамилию.
There was a young man, a firefighter. I don't remember his last name. He was a young man, and he was diagnosed with level 3 radiation. His face was badly burned. Just his face, but since he had a high dose of radiation, he had other symptoms too. He looked at me, his face was covered in burns, and those two dark blue eyes looked at me pleadingly. Please, help me somehow. I remember what I told him. Everything will be all right. Let's hope for the best. And he replied, "Can you tell my mother that?" His two eyes were like an abyss, but at the same time, there was a ray of hope. That was rough. I didn't tell his mother anything. I knew he wouldn't survive.
The accident affected all of Ukraine, all the systems in Russia and the USSR, and other countries too. So in my opinion, the people who contained the damage actually saved the whole world. And all the people who blocked off the burning reactor with their own bodies, those who built the sarcophagus, did it at the expense of their health.
You have to understand, they treated us as living materials. Who thought it would cost us, the liquidators, our lives? We were the living materials supplied by the induction centers and the army. At Chernobyl, there were 3 special units and representatives of every military region in the USSR. They all had no choice but to work to contain the radiation coming from the reactor.
A lot of people. How many? I won't say. Building the sarcophagus alone involved over 500,000 people, 600,000. There were 12 districts, 50,000 per district. They couldn't make them work 24/7 or on 8-hour shifts. They worked as much as the radiation allowed. Some went up for 3 minutes, they raked, dumped it, and left. And that was that. Or they worked below for 2 hours when they had to prepare equipment. People couldn't be kept in the area for over 2 hours. We were responsible for them.
The people who went through Chernobyl, they knew they had to carry out a national, governmental mission that had been placed before them. And they believed it was their duty.
If not me, then who? Someone had to do it. It had to be done. How can anyone regret it? There was no time to think, let alone regret it. We had to work to get the job done.
If a liquidator had a child today, they would be automatically designated a disaster victim, their child.
Ребенок. Если у ликвидатора родился ребенок. Сегодня детей.
The number of children in Ukraine that would be designated as disaster victims is in the millions.
Начисляется миллионами. Это не только те, которые родились.
These aren't only those who were born afterwards, but also those who were born then, at the time of the accident, in areas affected by the radiation.
Подверглась заражению.
I hadn't been back to Pripyat since. I didn't want to go back. I was afraid to go. It was all very traumatic for me. Is this the town square? Where's the culture hall? Is that it? Where's the music school? I'd like to see the music school. I studied there.
It isn't far. We can walk. It's just 100 meters from here.
Is there still radiation here?
Yes, but it's low. About 1 unit, about 1 microsievert.
And what's the normal level?
In Ukraine, it's 0.3, but it's okay. It isn't considered critical. This is all that's left of the concert hall.
This is the concert hall?
Yes.
We used to come here often. My sister took violin lessons here, and she also performed in concerts. I took painting courses, so I sat in the audience when she performed on stage. She played violin. I'm speechless. I don't know. It's a painful memory.
никому не проходит даром.
No one could have been protected from all of it.
Это жизнь наша,
It's part of our lives, and we can't escape it.
от которой мы уйти никак не можем.
These people did a heroic deed.
Это люди, которые совершили...
Were they rewarded for it?
Но сказать, чтобы их
I think they were
наградили,
simply forgotten
о них просто, мое мнение,
because no one needs them now.
потому что они сегодня никому не нужны. И мне
I'm so
очень
sorry.
жаль
When I delve into memories of the past, and I recall the people who gave their lives
опускаясь
and
перед
remained anonymous,
воспоминаниями в прошлое,
nobody knows
о
them.
том, что те люди,
That's the truth.
которые отдали свои жизни, о них никто не знает.
No one's heard of them.
конкретно.
And they did a heroic deed
А они совершили
by saving the lives of
по
millions.
спасению ни одного миллиона людей.